Hello, and welcome once again to Loveland's Talking. My name is Andy Hiller. I'm the Public Information Officer here for the City of Loveland to share with you, the public, information about what's going on with your city government. Today, we're going to be talking about something that you've heard a lot about and that has been going on in depth for quite some time. We're going to be talking about downtown, a vision for the future, a strategic plan that was passed a year ago. The city hired a consultant team to work on that plan, and also a new thing that's going on downtown is talk about the new Rialto Bridge project, and we'll get into that in some depth. So we're going to be talking about what's happening downtown, some of the major organizations who are involved, the plans for the downtown, and an RFP. We'll explain what that is. The time frames for all this, and then finally we'll finish with the information on the Rialto Bridge. And with me here today, as you see, are some people who are very involved in the downtown project, and I will have them introduce themselves, starting with Troy.
Thank you, Andy. Troy Peterson, and I am a property owner downtown Loveland. I've been downtown, or had property downtown, for a little more than a decade, and have followed the development and, steps forward as far as downtown has taken here over the last few years, and am involved in the Rialto Bridge project.
Thank you, Andy. And I'm Phil Farley. I'm a member of the Community Foundation, but I've been a resident of Loveland since 1978, first coming to Loveland to work for HP, actually. And it raised all of my kids here in Loveland. It's just been a terrific experience for all of us.
And I'm Mike Scholl. I'm part of the city. I'm on city staff and in the Development Services Department, and my primary responsibility is downtown revitalization. Andy, I have to make one quick correction. Our downtown strategic plan was written in-house. We hired consultants for another project, but we did do the strategic plan. Actually was done in-house as well. And I am also a resident of the city, and actually I have two boys. So.
Okay, thank you. Susan?
Hi, I'm Susan Eisen. I'm Cultural Services Director for the city. The Cultural Services Department includes the Loveland Museum Gallery, the Rialto Theater, and the Art in Public Places program.
Great, all of which have been very popular and very successful.
Thank you.
Yes, indeed. Okay, so the downtown strategic plan that was written in-house, were you one of the hands-on authors of that?
Yeah.
What a coincidence.
Yes. Well, I bring that up only because I know, we were able to do that in-house, and I think with the partnership with the Loveland Downtown team, and it's something that I think that because of that, because we did it, it's really been embraced a lot more, and it's helped us to move forward. One of the hallmarks of our downtown strategic plan is both that it recognizes the importance of the cultural and the arts in the role it plays in our downtown, but also it looks at downtown as a real estate development exercise, that really what we need to do is put in place a long-term strategy that recognizes the need to promote density and to promote employment and to work with property owners and developers to increase the value, because once you get the value in those buildings, you get the investment, and at that point the city can step back and take a lesser role. So it identifies the long-term strategy for success, and then again, how the exit strategies to how we can kind of step back and at what point, and that's through density and through promoting employment.
Okay. One thing I want to clarify, I'm the downtown layperson on this group here. It seems to me that a lot of people think the city can go in and do a lot of things downtown. But the fact is that the properties, Troy, are owned by individuals and corporations, etc. The city doesn't own all the properties. The city can't decide it would be really nice to have this in this building or that in this building, or even the sidewalks, I think, are probably owned by the property owners rather than the city. Is that correct?
Not in the downtown.
Not in the sidewalks you're talking about?
Yeah.
Okay.
I think what's key with that is the city's role can often be one of vision and leadership, because, as you stated, Andy, there are a lot of individual property owners. And sometimes it's difficult to get all of those individual property owners marching in the same direction. So the role, a very critical one that the public sector, that the city can play, is creating a vision that people can buy into, developing that strategy, and then at the appropriate time, leveraging some of the city's financial resources to augment private investment. So essentially take some city dollars, leverage those to attract significant outside private investment.
Right. But it's the private investment primarily, not the city, who can just go in and decide what's going to be where and how the downtown is going to look. I mean, we don't own the property, so it's not ours to choose what to do with it.
But we can't minimize the role of the city, though. The cost of development in the so-called greenfield development is 15 to 20% higher than the cost of development in a downtown, an existing area. So the city has to figure out a way to help make up that difference in development costs.
Okay. One thing you spoke about was increase in real estate value, and we have a couple of slides about a new business that is doing that. What is this building? I see it on the way into work every day, and it was only recently I learned exactly what it is.
Yeah, this is the 319 North Cleveland. So if you've driven down Cleveland, you've probably seen the construction. It is Lightning Hybrids. It's a local business. Dan Johnson, he's a local resident. It's a hydraulic hybrid car company, and he's putting his headquarters for his research and development right here in Loveland, and he really wants to be in downtown. And he did that with a lot of cities, with some, I shouldn't say a lot, but with in partnership with the city, helping out both, with simple things like utility locations, but also some incentives to try to offset some of the cost, as Phil mentioned, of doing a project of this scale in a built environment. And I think this picture here shows what it eventually will look like when both phases are complete.
You all are all involved in this, both individually and in groups or organizations. There are a lot of different players, if you will, in downtown. Can you give me a kind of an overview of some of those groups and organizations and individuals?
Well, the main group is the Loveland Downtown team, and Phil is a member of that, as is Susan and I, both serve as staff to that group. And that was established through the Loveland City Council as a liaison, or is the primary group stakeholder group responsible for promoting the revitalization of downtown. There are a couple other nonprofits in the community, the Downtown Loveland Association, which is a separate nonprofit, and they're active as an advocate for downtown, as well as the Community Foundation, which I'll let Phil talk about his role in.
Okay. The Downtown Loveland Association, is my understanding that's made up primarily of the merchants who are downtown?
Well,
or the property owners?
Yeah, well, there actually was it's a group of stakeholders. There was an association of downtown merchants, which was made up of the merchants, the businesses, but they've since merged into the Downtown Loveland Association as of, within the last month or so. And so the group, it's business owners, property owners, stakeholders, residents that are part of the Downtown Loveland Association.
Okay.
And it also includes people that are just interested in downtown.
Yeah.
Okay. Any other groups we should mention before I move on?
Well, certainly the Community Foundation has played a really big role in their leadership. I can't thank them enough. I mean, at least in my role, I know they've been a very important player in kind of helping advance some of these initiatives.
Yeah, could you go back and talk about the Loveland Downtown team for a minute?
Sure, by all means.
As Mike mentioned, both Susan and I are members of that team, and Troy has attended many of the Loveland Downtown team meetings. And it's a really interesting team of people, I think. It's made up of the managers of all the city departments. The city manager himself attends most of the meetings, at least over the last 6 months to a year. It has primary stakeholders from downtown, including folks from the DLA, property owners, business owners, and interested citizens. And some of those citizens are interested because they might be part of a choral group that performs at the Rialto all of the time. But people that are really interested in downtown. And this group, I think, has served as a valuable asset to City Council in terms of fleshing out ideas, fleshing out concepts about the revitalization of downtown that we can then take to City Council for City Council's approval. I think we've done some things that have been pretty interesting as participants of the Loveland Downtown team that have also, I think, helped the city in their development of the strategic plan. Now, we were the first to review the parking study that was commissioned. We were able to review the economic plans for downtown that was developed by a professor out of UNC. I think all of those helped drive the strategic plan. We also looked at how we could formalize the streetscape plan. It was called Destination Downtown, a term that I'm particularly fond of.
Yeah.
The Destination Downtown, the Hip Street project. And it talked about how the streetscape within Loveland could appear. The only issue that stands with all of these is that we still haven't figured out a way to fund them all.
Right, right.
So we could get them all built.
Okay. Sounds like you've been very busy.
Yeah, I wanted to add that the constant level of participation has been really impressive because this group has been meeting for several years now. But there, as Phil mentioned, there's a really good broad representation from the community, but there are always also people who come and attend in the audience, and there's an opportunity for citizen comments both at the beginning of the meeting and the end of the meeting, and so I would encourage anyone who would like to be involved to attend those meetings. They're the first Tuesday of every month at 8 o'clock.
8 a.m.?
Right here at the city.
Yes, 8 a.m.
8 a.m. here, first Tuesday of every month. Okay, good.
And I can only think, I'm not even sure there's a single meeting that we've not had significant citizen participation, people that would attend and offer comments.
Good. I mentioned in the introduction a downtown RFP.
Yes.
What is that?
Well, the RFP stands for Request for Proposals, and essentially what it is, in a nutshell, is the city's marketing tool to attract private development in downtown. And I think that that it's the extension of kind of our strategic planning effort to identify the need to create density and promote density in downtown and improve the quality of office space in our downtown so that we can attract employers. And one of the things that we have, I mean, if you could show the next, leading into the next slide.
Sure.
The city has made some strategic investments in properties for some for parking, some to expand our cultural services, some properties that the city already has owned for surface parking. And part of our goal was to leverage those public investments to maximize the private investment. And so what we did was we went out and identified a consulting group that typically would work for private sector developers and showed them the property that the city owns and said, help us develop a vision, a development vision for downtown that we can take to the marketplace and that we can use to attract private investors to come in and invest in downtown. And the image that you're seeing on the screen is their first cut of the conceptual plan, and the idea was to really demonstrate the type of development that we'd like to see in downtown Loveland. One that takes advantage of some vertical opportunities to go up, to add in the demand. We did a demand analysis that shows that we do have some demand for market rate residential units in our downtown, and also recognize that there's a lot of employers that are interested in locating in a downtown environment. But the problem that we've had is that we don't have good office space to show, or there's very limited office space to show in downtown. And so this really gets at some of those questions. It creates that space. It really creates 4th Street as the center of our downtown, looking at projects at both the north and south side of those, and really puts us in a very competitive position for private investment dollars. Because really, at the end of the day, this is about competing. And we as a city need to compete for these investment dollars. We need to get out and really put a good foot forward, show that we know what we're doing, recognize, demonstrate the type of development we're looking for. And also the other part of this, which we're working on now, is looking at the financials. What is it going to cost? What's the potential public participation? And once we get that and we wrap it together, we're going to go out and start trying to identify some developers that would be willing to partner with us to build something like this.
So this is kind of an image of what would be terrific to have downtown. These aren't necessarily specific plans. You referred to it earlier as conceptual drawings, et cetera. And this is showing a 3rd through 6th Street between Lincoln and Cleveland, which is definitely the heart of downtown. And some of the slides that follow show kind of more close-up of what this concept is all about. This one here, you can see the yellow area is the section we're about to look at, the south end. That's kind of the 3rd Street block.
Yes.
And then we'll go on to it. So what is this showing here?
This is 3rd Street again between Lincoln and Cleveland. It's the area just south of the Rialto Theater. Right now there's a surface parking lot, and there's a number of buildings that are in there that the city has purchased with the idea of expanding parking in some way. The property was identified, as Phil mentioned, in our parking study as key. But what we thought, is as we've gotten these properties, as our thinking has evolved, as we've talked to developers, if we talk with people like Troy, we thought, if we're going to make an investment in both in the property and looking at parking, let's try to maximize the use of that property. Let's try to get private and get a development in there that I think will enhance the downtown and really change the underlying economics that govern downtown. Because one of the things that in our strategic plan, our top principle is that everything we do has to be focused on changing the underlying economics that govern downtown, to really create that rationale for investment, to create the demand, to get people in the downtown, to create a more dynamic economy so that we don't necessarily need to be involved.
Speaking of people, the green-roofed buildings here are the ones that are in this conceptual drawing. Yes. What kind of buildings are those? Office building, residences, retail shops. What are we looking at here?
It's a concept that it's a mixed-use development. I mean, it's a kind of a term, used in kind of urban development that include both. You'll have a project like this would have both residential on upper stories, taking advantage of the nicer views, and then also on the lower floors you would have a combination of retail, commercial, and office space. To take advantage of the foot traffic.
This is kind of more of a ground level view of those buildings.
This is a view. If you were at Cleveland Avenue, looking across the street to where this would be 3rd Street, and one of the features of this concept is that we could close 3rd Street down. It's a very wide street for its use. It's almost used kind of I would say it's kind of a de facto surface parking lot right now, but it's wide and it ends at the railroad and here at the Civic Center, so there's not a huge need to have it as a pass-through. So it opens up an opportunity for us to use that piece as development as well, and I think this and the previous image kind of demonstrate that.
Yeah, here's another look at it, and what strikes me is this really shows off the parking lot.
Sure.
And, of course, parking and the possibility of a parking lot has been discussed quite a bit for downtown. Is that basically the space right behind the Rialto that we're looking at, where that surface parking lot is right now?
Yes, and it would. And that concept would be the parking deck, and that would be used to support the residents and the commercial space in that development project. What we're trying to, we'd like to do is maximize that space again. And when you maximize that space for private use, it really means going vertical and taking advantage of that space. But there would be some opportunity for some public spaces in there, depending on what we get coming forward.
Okay, and here's a walk down the street in that neighborhood.
Yes, this is an image of Lincoln. looking north on Lincoln Avenue as you drive into downtown Loveland, how that streetscape would look, trying to create an inviting, welcoming view as you drive into the downtown, and you've arrived in downtown Loveland.
And would those be retail stores on the left here?
Potentially. It really depends. Again, what we're trying to do is demonstrate what we'd like to see in the development, but really, when we send this out into the marketplace, we're hoping to get back a lot of good responses, and so a lot of the uses, I think, will be dependent on what the private developer...
I'm going to offer you a couple personal ones.
Okay.
For morning use, good bagel shop would be very welcome.
Sure.
Okay. And for a nice warm afternoon, an ice cream shop would be good as well. So there's
my wife
input.
Would not disagree with you.
More food
on the ice cream.
More food, indeed. Okay.
Now, well, some of the things that I really liked about this conceptual design is that you saw multiple heights on the buildings. So you didn't have this monolithic building that you would see when you drove into downtown.
I gotcha.
And plus, you have these really interesting setbacks from the street of those buildings. Again, these are only conceptual designs. We don't know what the final design will look like. But I really do like those concepts that are outlined.
So a muffler shop probably isn't likely to be there, huh?
Not that we're against
or maybe the one you wear around your neck, that type of muffler. All right, we're moving north here, kind of into your neighborhood here. This is the circle around the 6th Street block between the two. And I'll click to the next one, and this is kind of an overview of that area. It looks like there are kind of two major components there. What do we have?
Well, I'll talk about the one briefly, and then I'll turn it over to Susan. But when we started the conceptual plan, this process that we had with the consultant that we hired, we did a 3-day design workshop. We had a building in downtown, and we invited up to, I think, about 80 property owners, stakeholders, business owners, and put all the images on the wall and let them go to work with our consultants. And one of the things that they said was maybe we should think about pulling the art museum a little closer into downtown, closer to 4th Street, which changed our thinking a little bit because the city had purchased this property. This is the Home State Bank building. It's 6th and Lincoln.
That's where it,
this is the
that's
image
where it currently is.
It
no longer is in this picture, correct?
Correct. And so, but there's a lot of work to do, and I know Susan will talk about that. So it allowed us to take this, again, leverage the public investments to try to maximize the private investment and look at this as a development opportunity. And so this is really, it's much smaller than the one on 3rd Street, but again, it's an opportunity to do another mixed-use development project, residential, commercial, and really increase that density in downtown.
Okay.
Well, and to that point, to augment what Mike is saying, is that most successful urban environments, most successful downtowns on various scales are successful because of density in many respects, both residential density and commercial density. So people living in that downtown area, supporting that downtown area by going out to the restaurants, buying goods, buying services, and having primary jobs located downtown. Both of those elements are extremely important to the economic vitality of a downtown community. And then there are many other elements that contribute to bringing people in, not only civic attractions like the Rialto Theater, but also reasons to congregate downtown. And it needs to be pedestrian friendly and connected and unique. And we all up here at this panel believe that Loveland has a lot of assets and a lot of uniqueness that we can leverage and build on to create a downtown that is truly a destination that would appeal to many different people, both living in and living outside of this community today.
Okay. We're going to focus on the next one here. The gray roofed buildings here are what, Susan?
It's a conceptual design.
I knew you were going to say that. Of what, though?
For the museum expansion.
Okay.
The current museum was built in 1992, and the museum has grown with the community. And the museum really has 3 major functions. The first one, which is the heart of the museum, and the reason that our museum exists is the collection. The collection started in the 1920s with a merchant who was downtown. And I won't go through all of the history, but that collection now includes about 35,000 objects.
Wow.
And it's something that most people don't realize. I mean, there are probably maybe 10% of what we have in the collection is on exhibit at any one time. And we do rotate things occasionally. This is, primarily the history area. But the collecting part is very, very active. And when you get an opportunity to take in things that will only, it's a one-time chance. Good examples are when Great Western Sugar Factory closed down. We were allowed to go into the building for about a month before the new ownership took over and take out objects that were important to our Loveland history, and we later developed an exhibit on that. Same thing with the Valentine remailing program when Ted and Mabel Thompson died, and acquiring their collection, and the Alabaster House. So, we try to be careful about what we collect, and it needs to be relevant to Loveland history, but there are numerous opportunities for that. And so the collection continues to grow, and we're spilling out of the building with the collection. So that's a huge need. And then, of course, there are the exhibits. People can't just come and see collections. They want to see exhibits. And we have, I think one of the strengths of our museum is that we are both a history museum and an art museum. And that has developed over time because Loveland has developed as an arts community. We were originally a history museum, and the arts part of it really started in the 70s, so maybe longer ago than most people realize. And it has grown over the years, and when we did the expansion in '92, we allocated about half and half for history and art. And I think that's a strength because typically museums are separated. You go to the history museum and you go to the art museum in different buildings. But in fact, there are many crossovers. I mean, art has become part of our history.
Right.
And people will come to the history part thinking that maybe they're not so interested in the art, and vice versa, and they'll become engaged. And so I think it's an important experiential thing for many people who might not otherwise have it. So the exhibit area, we exhibit now. I mean, we plan our exhibits about 3 years in advance. We constantly have people coming to us, who want to exhibit. And even the large show that we do, the Governor's Invitational, done by Rotary every year, is we need more space. The third part of it is the programs, and that's we didn't have much space for programming with the museum prior to the 1992, so we just really started to dabble in programs when we did the expansion in '92, and that's really mushroomed. Both the art classes, history lectures. We tried for a long time to make our downstairs auditorium sort of function as a classroom, and also as a lecture space. And frequently when you try to do too many things with one space, none of them work very well. So acquiring the sequel several years ago allowed us to move our classrooms over next door.
And when you say the sequel, explain
and I'm going to
that.
explain that.
Okay.
And we also, in the sequel, which I will explain, are spilling our collection over into that building too. So the sequel was named by the staff because we wanted something better than just saying the former Home State Bank building. And it was acquired.
I didn't get that memo.
You didn't get that memo. It was acquired several years ago for a future expansion site, with the intention being to raise the building and build on that site. There is a proposal now, as you can see here, to perhaps change the site and use the sequel site for development and flip-flop from the north to the south for the museum expansion. And I'm going to mention again the design. We have done nothing on the design intentionally because there's going to be a lot of...
So it might not look anything like this.
It might not look anything like that. Although I wanted to mention some of the elements that we have talked about right now on our, with the staff. We've got bubbles of what we want to see in the building, but don't really have an outside conceptual design. But in addition to the just a larger art gallery, we want to add a local artist gallery. We want to do an exhibit specifically on the bronze casting technique. We get questions about that all the time, and I don't think there's been anything comprehensive that's available for people. We are very excited about what we're calling the Youth Activity Zone, to try to put a youth area that will be interactive and have classrooms all in one spot. And hopefully we'll be able to tie it in to the public safety exhibits. Some of you may know that the firemen approached us a while back, and they have created a temporary exhibit in the sequel. Yes. Because they were just ready to go, and they had a large collection. And we intend to redo and incorporate that into the museum expansion, and we'll probably add a component from the police department too. We also have a lot of requests for use of the building for just sort of general gatherings. And one of the things that's happened with the current building, and I've joked about this, is that we've moved as many walls around as we can, that we've built walls for storage at the end of some spaces, and so the rooms have gotten smaller, and the front counter is pushed out because there wasn't enough room. We had to add staff because of the attendance. And so our sort of public space area has gotten smaller. But if anybody's attended an event, there's a real bottleneck when you come into the museum. So we've had this vision of having a very open lobby area for public gatherings that would spill out onto an open space, a green space, a courtyard. I don't know exactly how it would look, but it would be sort of what they call back east the Commons area, the meeting space. And it's something that's not only important for the museum, but that pedestrian-friendly hanging out area, I think, is very, very important for downtown and is really lacking.
And that was a really big issue with the group when we met to do the design work with the consultant, when the community members came together, was to have a kind of an urban oasis, I guess is a good way of some green space and meeting space in downtown. And so I think, and that reflects it, and I think the thing is that it keeps it very simple, because it offers a lot of opportunity to include design work as we work through this process. Because as Susan was alluding to, and I think with the RFP, this is really a process, and it's a long-term process that we're going to work through. And this is one step. It's a conceptual design to really demonstrate the kind of thing we're looking for, but and get folks excited about it. Not just the folks in the Loveland, but also to really get folks that are going to come in and write the checks to do the investment in here, to get them excited about what we really want to do in this community. So we're excited. I think we're looking at coming back to council in this month, and then we're going to come back again next month, and then I think we're going to look at distributing the RFP probably sometime in November, depending. But we're working through some of those details right now. Okay.
And we can't minimize, I don't think, the green space that's included there, because that really does add an element to Loveland, downtown Loveland, that's lacking.
And having it function with the museum as an interior-exterior space all at once, I think, is really an added benefit.
And the potential connectivity from there through the Mr. Neats building to the Rialto Theater.
Yes.
So we really would have a cultural corridor.
A cultural corridor.
Yes. We still need to get to the Rialto Bridge, too.
Yeah. And speaking of which, let's talk about the Rialto and the Rialto Bridge. What is the Rialto Bridge? Is that a structure between the Rialto and something else? I'm being semi-facetious here.
Well, first, I would like to address why there needs to be a Rialto Bridge.
Okay.
Over 80% of the use of the present Rialto Theater is community performing arts groups that rent the theater. And many of those groups are very large. They have 100 people plus in them. The Rialto was built in 1920 as a movie theater in a vaudeville house, and that function did not require a lot of backstage space. So there is really no place to comfortably put that many people at one time. And so over the years, I mean, from the time the Rialto opened, it's been an issue. But as the use of the theater has grown, it's, of course, gotten to be a larger issue. So what the groups have done is rent space from other nearby buildings and run up and down the alley. And obviously that's not an ideal situation, particularly in the middle of the winter. And in fact, one of the people from the Loveland Choral Society did a little little film of people running up and
Really?
down the alley for one of their performances. And as some of the other spaces have filled up, it's become harder for them to find places to rent. So the desire to do something to add backstage space for the Rialto has been, been around for a long time. So obviously you want it to be next door, and so the city several years ago acquired Quality Shoe when they went out of business, and then Troy and I had been sort of talking about a public-private partnership for quite a while, and I think I will segue into letting Troy talk a little bit about that. But maybe before that is I wanted to mention that the development of all of this, the beauty of it for me has been the public-private partnership with the Community Foundation. I just don't think it gets much better than that from my point of view, because there's involvement on different levels and a true partnership that creates a win-win-win situation, yes. I think.
Well, thanks, Susan. I think as the public can see from the slides that have been before you up to this point, there is a grand vision, if you will, for downtown Loveland. And obviously that's not going to occur or transform or be built out overnight. It's going to take time. That being said, like we have previously discussed, you need to have that vision. It needs to be a discussion point. It needs to build momentum because it's going to take significant resources, time, money, people, etc., to make it a reality. At some point in time, though, you have to move beyond pictures and models and renderings and move to a real project. Historically in downtown Loveland, there have not been a lot of significant investments in redevelopment. The Lincoln Place project is a great example of an entire city block on the old Walgreens site that redeveloped and has been very successful, especially on the residential side. What Dan's doing with the Lightning Hybrids building is also a great example of downtown redevelopment and the attraction and retention of primary jobs. When it comes to our core, though, between Lincoln and Cleveland, not a lot has occurred. And what we're talking about here is really trying to create a catalyst project that will lead to other redevelopment projects and other future investment. And that's the Rialto Bridge. The Rialto Bridge, to piggyback off what Susan said, it's an exciting project. It really is. It's exciting for the community. It's exciting for what it will do for the theater. It's exciting for the restaurant space and the other private office space that will be brought downtown. And it's one of those projects that is a starting point or a jumping off point that hopefully will lead to literally a transformation for downtown Loveland. I'm
going to ask you, if you would, you guys deal with the concept of the Rialto Bridge all the time. Some of the people watching may not quite understand what you mean by that. As you look at the screen here, or the image on the screen, the existing Rialto Theater is on the left. To the right is what would become the Rialto Bridge, which is now what was the shoe shop and also what was a restaurant, correct?
Correct. What it does, Andy, is the Rialto Bridge, first of all, is a metaphor of sorts. It's bridging from the old historic theater to a new structure. So as Susan mentioned, the historic theater was built in 1920, 90 years ago, celebrating its 90th anniversary, 90th birthday this year. So you've got a bridge between the old and the new and enhancing the historic theater and everything it's meant since the city came in and redeveloped the theater in 1996. That metaphor also rings true when one considers that the Rialto was named after the Rialto Bridge, or many Rialto theaters across the country that were built during that time period were named after the historic Rialto Bridge in Venice over the Grand Canal. And that bridge also connects two neighborhoods. So what we're doing in this image is we're showing the connection between old and new, and there's a new two-story atrium lobby, which we affectionately call the hyphen, that connects the old historic theater with the new building. So Rialto Bridge is a name that fits on many levels, frankly, for the project.
And Susan mentioned that one of the functions of it would be to support and house or have space for all the people in the community that work on these shows that the theater itself does not have room for. What would some of the other uses be, or what would the other space be involved with?
Yeah, I wanted to speak to that because the backstage space that I was speaking about earlier, of course, will primarily be seen by the user groups, not by the general public. It's sort of analogous to the collection area in the museum. All of that, helps the entity function the way it needs to. But the community room is another part of it that is so critical, I think, because many of the functions that happen in the Rialto, people want to have a social event either before or after. And if you've been in the theater, the lobby is not that big. And you can be shoulder to shoulder, and there's not much room for any kind of a social interaction. And so bridging over to the community room, which you see on the second floor there, is also a critical support need, not only by the groups that use the Rialto by any means, but for the entire community. Because I think if anybody's tried to plan a personal special event, and you start looking for spaces, this will be an absolutely beautiful space to do all kinds of, both public and private.
So there
events.
could be a dinner event in advance of walking next door and seeing the show,
Yes.
or there could be a totally unrelated wedding or something
Yes.
like that
Yes.
in that space.
And that was actually one of the things that was recently brought to our attention, was that for a wedding, if you want to be married in the Sweetheart City in Loveland, you can now, with this project, do your wedding in the theater and have the reception in the bridge, and I think so. It's going to be a real dynamic facility, I think, for both public uses and a lot of expand our cultural and the cultural offerings and support the Rialto, but also be available to the public for use that does nothing but just continues to enhance our downtown, gets people down there, and really makes it an interesting place to be.
Troy and Phil, you guys are involved in kind of making this happen kind of on the financial side or the investment side, et cetera. Am I correct in that?
You are correct. One of the ways that we've described this, by the way, going back to the other discussion before I answer the question, is that we've kind of described it when we're talking to people as connecting art, artists, and community. And I think it really describes what the Rialto Bridge does. We're connected to the art and the artists that perform at the Rialto, and the community is actively engaged in the space, the public spaces within the Rialto Bridge itself, within that structure. But we're involved with it because of the Community Foundation.
And explain what the Community Foundation is.
There are about 700 community foundations within the United States. A thing that a lot of people are surprised at is to learn that community foundations collectively give more money to nonprofits than United Way.
Wow.
And the difference between the amount of money distributed to United Way and community foundations is increasing each year. At about 1997 or 1998, the two lines that described their giving intersected, and the Community Foundation continues to grow at a faster rate than United Way continues to grow. Our particular community foundation is called the Community Foundation of Northern Colorado. The headquarters are in Fort Collins, but we have a local community fund committee in Loveland, in Berthoud, in Fort Collins, and in Estes Park. And the charge of each one of those local community fund committees is to manage the unrestricted funds that have been given by residents within that community. So in the case of Loveland, we have about $600,000 that are included within our Loveland Community Fund. It's unrestricted funds. So we want to make sure that we manage that money very effectively. We also know that we have to play the role of convening or serving as a leader as we talk about any kind of community development. So we had about a 2-year period when we spent a lot of time trying to answer the question, what can we do that would benefit Loveland as a whole? What would be the best thing that we could do that would benefit Loveland as a whole? And after we talked to developers at Centera, downtown business owners, downtown property owners, the president of the Downtown Loveland Association, the city, more than once. We finally concluded the thing that we should focus on was the revitalization of downtown. Well, then the city bought the Quality Shoe Store. Troy came up, along with Susan, with this great idea of why don't we raise these two unattractive buildings, replace them with a 3-story building, but all of a sudden there'd be more public space in that building than the city contracted for by the purchase of the Quality Shoe Store. So there were 2 rooms that stood right out in front of these things. The ones that you see in the slides or the ones where you have all of the glass that's kind of in the picture frame on the second floor. That's the community room. Right behind that is an atrium, and that, in the initial plans, that totaled about 3,500 square feet. The estimate of the building cost would be somewhere in the neighborhood of $200 a square foot. So the Community Foundation made the commitment that we would raise $700,000 to support this vitally needed space within downtown Loveland.
That's a significant amount of money.
It is a significant amount of money. And if people want to help contribute to that, there's a website that they can go to.
And it is?
It is rialtobridgecampaign.org.
One more time.
rialtobridgecampaign.org. So www.rialtobridge.org.
Campaign.
Well, rialtobridgecampaign.org.
I wish we were just testing it.
Yeah, and I flunked, huh?
Okay.
But on that site, beginning today, there will be a pledge form that people will be able to complete. And they can make their pledges to help support us in this $700,000 activity. It is completely consistent with our objective to help revitalize downtown, because we have not found any other project that would have anything like the impact in the short term and the long term that the Rialto Bridge would have in downtown Loveland.
So the foundation would be one of the partners in this public-private partnership. And Troy, you're the private in this. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Explain that. Explain your role.
As we looked at the building and the uses within the building, it became readily apparent that there were public uses, expansion of the theater, the community room, which the Community Foundation is buying into, as well as some private space. There's room on the ground floor, basically along the street, for an anchor restaurant, and then also the entire 3rd floor would be private office space, about 5,000 to 6,000 square feet. So one would think of that as maybe 40 to 50 or so employees up there. 1, 2, maybe 3 key employers or companies. Small companies, of which there are a number in Loveland that are doing quite well in spite of, the recent economy. So early on, it was desired to have this public-private partnership move forward with the design and the concept for the building. I'm driving the private sector involvement. I have a small number of investors that I am also an investor in the project, and we're working hand in hand with the city to hopefully deliver a project to the community that is one that we can be celebrating for many years to come.
Well, you spoke earlier about kind of the other slides that we saw as kind of a grand vision for the future, and that this is more likely to occur in the nearer future. What is the time frame on this if it indeed moves forward?
Sure. This project hopefully will be breaking ground later this year, and by breaking ground, it's essentially taking down the 2 existing buildings. Construction will occur during the bulk of 2011, and ideally we'd be looking at the completion with both the city and the private tenants moving in sometime late next year, so 4th quarter 2011. And I think it's critical. I mean, certainly times are tough. Times are tough out there for many folks. Credit is tight, and there are, development and redevelopment, especially in downtown cores, are challenging. Redevelopment is challenging, And a lot of the projects that are coming online today have some measure of public financing. So I think this is the right project at the right time and the right partners, frankly, amongst the three of us to hopefully lead then. Obviously we have to execute, right? We have to deliver a successful project that the community endorses and the private tenants endorse as well and can be successful in. But there are many folks beyond Loveland's borders that are watching this project very closely, because if this project is successful in this climate, they would be looking to invest their own private dollars into some of these future projects that we've been, sharing the vision of. And it's all very, it's possible. Certainly it's possible, it's doable, but it has to start somewhere. And it happens to be starting at this point with the core and the Rialto Bridge project.
So we are close to a groundbreaking or a brick raising or whatever you want to call it for this
It's not
project.
without its challenges, Andy, certainly, but yes, we're very hopeful that all of the hard work and due diligence to this point will result in a project in the not-too-distant future.
I think that'll be very exciting and, again, a major catalyst for downtown.
Yes,
Phil.
Andy, let me make another point, too, just to make sure we're not trying to slight Troy with this, but we want to make it very clear to everyone who might be watching, is that all of the contributions that come through the Community Foundation to the Rialto Bridge will only go to the public portion of the building. None of those contributions will go to the private portion. They will qualify for an enterprise zone tax credit, so that means that any donor will get a 25% tax credit on their Colorado state tax, as well as the standard deductions they get in their federal income tax. But none of the money goes to the private developer. It all goes to the public portion. So at the completion of the campaign, we will donate that money and donate this portion of the building to the community through the city. So we will give it to the city for the city to be able to manage long term.
Okay. So the money would be well spent for a number of reasons then.
That's right.
Okay, good. Well, we've covered a lot of ground here, kind of literally and figuratively. Anything else you folks want to add before we call it a day?
I just want to thank you for doing this. We appreciate it. And I would also say that if anyone has any questions about downtown or what we're working on downtown, they can always call me. My number is 962-2607. Again, it's 962-2607. I'm available. If anyone has questions, what we're doing, share ideas, it's always welcome. So.
And since this is going global, that's area code 970.
That's right. I'll mention to folks that recently we have begun putting Loveland's Talking on YouTube. If you haven't already found it, the city has a YouTube channel, City of Loveland, or YouTube/City of Loveland, or something like that. But if you search, you'll find Loveland's Talking videos and a number of other brief videos with other pieces of information that you may find very interesting. So there's a plug for that.
And while they're on their web,
yes,
they ought to make sure they go to www.rialtobridgecampaign.org.
There you go.
And fill out a pledge form.
There you go. Good, good. Okay, well, thank you all for spending your time with this. You've been spending a lot of time with the downtown project, so this is one more piece. I appreciate it, and the community appreciates it, too, I'm sure. Folks, thank you once again for tuning in to Loveland's Talking, and take a walk downtown and take a close look at all of this for yourself, both now and how it may change, certainly soon or relatively soon with the Rialto Bridge and thereafter. So, again, thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you next month here on Loveland's Talking. So long.
Thank you.